Okay, moving on to the Magic Wand tool. The Magic Wand tool is housed underneath the Quick Selection tool and is the last of our primary selection tools. So the Magic Wand tool is our color-based selection tool. So notice it has different parameters in the control panel, but a lot of these parameters are very similar to some of our marquee tools and the lasso tool, but with a few different settings. So we're back to our selection modes because we have a regular pixel selection tool. So we have new selection, add to selection, subtract, and intersect. So you can do that with the Magic Wand tool. But next we have sample size. So let me explain how this works. So the Magic Wand tool is used in a way to select pixels of similar color. So down below here in the grass, I have a green color. But notice there's a lot of variation in this hue of green. So the hue of green actually spans all the way across the spectrum until we get into the reds and the oranges of this, organic color palette. So in nature, you will find these really beautiful transitions and good color palettes based on them. But if I'm trying to isolate a specific color in an image, I want some controls of it. So based on image quality, what you have when you're taking a sample with the Magic Wand tool to tell it to select a certain color, you will click on an image and it will select that color in a certain way based on the parameters you have set in the control panel. So let me explain those. The first is sample size. And if you notice from the sample size drop-down menu, there's an averaging system that is used, and then you start by the default on point sample. What point sample refers to, I'm going to deselect that selection I made. Point sample refers to the actual pixel or point in the canvas that I clicked on. That is the color the Magic Wand tool is going to try to grab. So it is one singular point. But if depending on a high resolution graphic or a graphic that has a lot of noise in it or a graphic that doesn't have really good color resolution, and you want to get an average of color so that you're selecting the general color in that area, you can use the averaging commands. So what this means is when I click on a point, it is going to grab 3 pixels and average that color value and select that color. So it may not be the exact color you click on, but it's going to be an average of 3 pixels in that area. Then you have a 5-5 average, 11-11, 31-31, 51, and so on and so forth. So this allows you to grab a certain average range of pixels to get a different hue sample. That way, you will get a more realistic value for the green grass. But to continue on, I'm going to go over tolerance because point sample can work just fine depending on how your tolerance is set. So tolerance is relative to your point sample because a point sample is going to determine the hue you're going to select. But tolerance then tells you how far you're willing to deviate from that hue. So how many other hues or analogous hues are you willing to include in the selection? So if your tolerance is low, it will only deviate a very short distance from the point sample or the averaging command that you use. So tolerance of 3 selects very few pixels. It's just going to get the green I clicked on and just a little bit of a variation from that green. And you can see it only selects little speckles of selections all over the bottom grass area. So I'm going to deselect that. Let's increase our tolerance to an extreme level to see the difference. I'm going to type it all the way up to 100. That's the maximum tolerance level you can set. So I'm saying I want you to get this point sample and you can deviate 100 from that sample. So I click on it, it selects the entire grassy area. So not only did it grab the green I clicked on, but it was such a tolerated hue that it spanned the entire analogous spectrum of the grass in totality. So obviously that setting's a little too heavy-handed, so what I would do is maybe set it at 30, and let's try that. When I set it at 30 and click in the same location, now you can see it really specified maybe just the green, maybe a little bit of the oranges and reds, but really stayed specific. So by using point sample and tolerance together, you could basically control the Magic Wand tool to grab just the particular color pixels you want. But it does take a little finessing and a little practice because it's all dependent on the color data in the file. If the file, like I said, has poor color resolution or poor color data, then the Magic Wand tool may not work as well as it does in higher resolution, higher color data images. Next in line is anti-aliasing. So we covered that with our other selection tools. because this has an irregular shaped selection, it's going to have non-straight lines. So when you have non-straight lines or curved line segments or curved selection segments, you're going to have to apply anti-aliasing to smooth them. But you don't have to. If you want to just stick strictly to the pixel grid, you can uncheck that. Contiguous. This checkbox is relative to the selection the Magic Wand makes. Because the Magic Wand is fully color-based, you don't make a selection with it. You choose a color, and then the tool chooses all the other colors relative based on your sample size and the tolerance. So contiguous allows you to choose only colors that are touching. So sample only contiguous pixels. So it won't sample pixels that are away and grab them in the selection. So when you check contiguous, you're constraining the sample. And when you have it unchecked, the sample can be anywhere. So it really changes the selection. So let's try that and see what the difference is with my tolerance and sample size staying the same. So I'll make a deselect on that selection, click contiguous, and then come over to my same location and click it. And you can see when I do contiguous, notice there's much more free space in this selection. It's not getting all specific and also breaking up the selections to be little chunks and pieces. It's making one contiguous selection. So it's, again, based on the content, but it's a good idea to practice it with different selection tests that you're doing because it can get you in the pocket much easier. But again, content driven, so it really depends on the imagery that you're using. So I'm going to deselect that. Lastly in the list is sample all layers. With the sample all layers function, that's directly related to either photo editing and photo adjustments or compositing. So when you do sample all layers, it can take information from all the layers in your layers panel, and when you have it unchecked, it only takes information from the layer that you currently have selected. So that is the Magic Wand tool, and to round out all the selection tools, I want to make one final talking point for the selection tools that I haven't mentioned in any of the tutorials. If I go to my rectangle marquee tool and I make a selection with it, really generic, geometric, box square shape, then let's say I want to add a little bit to it. So I'd go to the add mode and I add some pieces to the side that bump out here. But here's the amazing, limitless nature of your selection tools. Once I make a selection with one selection tool, I can then go to another selection tool and then use the add function to continue adding to the selection I already created. So if I wanted to add rounded edges to these corners, I can just put an ellipse there and an ellipse there. And now I've added to my rectangular marquee an elliptical marquee structure. And I can add anti-aliasing as I'm making that selection. Then if I had a more organic section, I would go to my lasso tool. And with my lasso tool, I'd select add to selection, and then I can add a piece out that's very organic in nature and cycle it around like that and add that to my selection. And then lastly, if I want, I can go to my quick select tool and I can go to my Magic Wand tool and add selections to my previous selection using those tools. So in a nutshell, your selection tools either independently are extremely powerful based on the content they're being used for, but with all of their limitless settings that you have in each of the individual tools and some of the smart functions like in Magic Wand and Quick Select, you have the ability to combine all of them together to make more refined selections. So that being said, you can do a huge, huge amount of your selection work using Quick Select, Magic Wand, lasso tools, and marquee tools without using any of the other advanced techniques. Now that being said, the advanced techniques for doing selecting and masking and color range are totally amazing and have way more power than your primary selection tools, but it is always a good idea to understand your foundational tools because when the advanced algorithmically driven tools start to malfunction or they can't do the job, you're going to have to go back to these primary tools to clean up your selections. So that is rounding out your primary selection tools, and the following tutorials will continue on with compositing with layer masks.